bureaucracy and hold people accountable for what they do and do not do. It means putting our country before the selfish, petty politics of the moment. It means fighting through the bureaucracy. It means being an adult and having truth-based discussions about the reality of the situation and our future. It also means standing up for our country, our freedoms, our Constitution, and understanding our history, the good and the bad, and doing it responsibly in a manner that would make us all proud. In other words, it is an America First agenda, not just on foreign policy or a particular issue, but in standing up for our country, our flag, our rights, our freedom, and our future. We should learn from the past, strive to become better, respect our neighbors, and love those around us no matter their background. But in a time of intense polarization, when the overlap between the beliefs of the left and right seem to have disappeared, passing even the most basic legislative solutions has become a heavy lift. To get around this challenge, the left has embraced what I call disaster liberalism. Disaster liberalism is a means by which Democrats use the threat of an impending crisis to justify enacting unpopular or unconstitutional policies on an accelerated timeline that bypasses traditional checks and balances. Whether the crisis is legitimate, fabricated, or exaggerated, the solution is always the same: more government, less individual freedom, higher spending, higher taxes. Every crisis becomes a vehicle to enact an agenda that could not otherwise gain support in a democratic republic. This is a strategy that worked for the left. Voters tend to trust conservatives on economic policy, individual rights, and foreign policy. But on humanitarian issues, they relate to the emotional appeals of the heart. Disaster liberalism uses that emotional language to attack conservative concerns, such as runaway spending, gun rights, or religious liberty, as heartless. In this way, they can distract from the power grab buried inside their policy agenda. By cloaking the strengths of conservatism, they also hide the weaknesses of progressivism. But only so long as voters don't catch on. This audiobook is intended to help voters do just that. I clearly recall my first real taste of disaster liberalism. I had been elected on a promise of reining in government spending. It was my top priority. There was no way I was going to vote for bloated budget bills and opaque earmarks. Then Hurricane Sandy barreled into the eastern seaboard in 2012, creating a crisis that demanded an expedited response. There would have been real suffering, legitimate need, and dire consequences if we didn't act. Of course I was going to vote in favor of spending to help those devastated by that destructive storm. But to my disappointment, the so-called emergency spending included $24 billion for line items that wouldn't be spent for at least 4 years. The emergency response bill included funding for Head Start, new cars for the Drug Enforcement Administration, oil spill research, leaky roofs at the Smithsonian museums, and historic preservation at the National Park Service. The emergency became a vehicle by which pet policy priorities could be funded without the regular order of a budget process. I felt I had no choice but to vote for the bill. Just like a business or household, when disaster strikes, another part of the budget needs to be adjusted. Heaven forbid we actually budget for contingencies. Though I knew we needed to help those in need, I was frustrated that we didn't have any discussion about where else we could have cut spending for the obvious and deserving disaster funding. Instead, we did the opposite. We added new low-priority spending instead of cutting low-priority spending. It was a pattern that would repeat over and over again. I wrote this book with my incredibly talented partner in politics for the past decade plus, Jennifer Scott, because I hope people recognize, learn, and never forget what happens time and time again in Washington, D.C. The pandemic of 2020